I believe that work is about taking action and that business is the process of solving a problem profitably. And I think that part of that disingenuousness or that sort of inauthentic self that we may bring to work is when a organization or a leader is too focused on the profit and not focused enough on the problem that they're solving.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Greg Offner, keynote speaker, pianist, singer, performer, and extraordinaire. Greg has been a friend of mine for some time, and his journey is something that I think you will thoroughly enjoy. From being a dueling pianist at bars and dealing with requests, which we kind of kick off with, to losing his voice, which is also his livelihood, and dealing with some very serious mental health issues that we talk through. He took all of this, transformed it, grew through it, and ultimately now is a keynote speaker with many large firms. He's built quite the career, as well as written a book working on additional content and materials. And we talk a lot about the psychology of transforming yourself, as well as what does that look like as leaders within organizations, and so much more. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did, and have a wonderful day. Cheers. So Greg, talk to me about being a dueling pianist.
It is the strangest job to people who aren't in the music industry. But in the music industry, it's actually kind of a unique opportunity to have a collaboration with people, yet not really know what that collaboration is going to look like from day to day.
Meaning like jazz improv with another musician, or is it something broader than that?
So the dueling pianos kind of has a history that goes back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, at least here in the US. So my understanding of the profession is that it started here in the States at a bar in New Orleans called Pat O'Brien's. And back when Pat's opened, the main style of music that people were playing was ragtime. And so the dueling aspect was piano players facing each other, so two pianos on stage, and they would play some sort of ragtime mashup. And so one player would do 16 bars of a song, and then the other player would respond or duel with their 8 or 16 bars of the song. And it would kind of go back and forth until they reached the end of the song or the end of that particular medley, and then they'd move on. But in the 1900s, specifically like getting into the 20s, ragtime was sort of being eclipsed by blues and jazz. And so that changed the format of the show because now there were lyrics and now it was songs, singing songs, not just performing songs. And so naturally, when there's singing and alcohol involved, everybody wants to sing if they know the words. And so this brought the audience.
Even if they don't know the words,
Even if they don't, that's right. They'll just make them up. This brought the audience more into the show. So it became less voyeuristic and more participatory. And the challenge that Pat's was having was the audience were shouting requests at the piano players. So it was this very crazy and rowdy and raucous environment. And at some point, one of the staff members had suggested that they start using cocktail napkins and writing implements so that instead of yelling at the piano players, the patrons could write their request down on a slip, and the servers would bring it up to the piano. And that's how the format you'd see today was born, where there are request slips all throughout the bar, and patrons are encouraged to fill them out, bring them up with a tip, and then the piano players curate the experience for the crowd. And so when I said it's this collaboration, but you sort of don't know what it's going to look like from day to day, you know the hits that you're going to get, Sweet Caroline, Piano Man, etc. But you're not sure in what order. And you don't know if the crowd is going to, especially in a touristy place, is going to skew more country or more R&B, pop. So you have to have a wide knowledge of music, the ability to pivot and adapt quickly to what the audience wants. But within that experience are also these well-rehearsed bits that piano players have. And so that's why it is doable, but difficult for a new player to just show up and join the group. Typically what you're seeing when you go to a dueling piano bar are people that play together pretty regularly. And so I know what songs you're going to be more adept or interested in playing. And so if I get a request for Hit Me Baby One More Time, and I know you do a really funny Britney Spears shtick, I'm going to toss that over to you. So quite literally, we'll crumple up the slip and throw it your way.
Oh, interesting.
And if you get something I'm better at, like a Maroon 5 song, you're going to toss that my way. And while I handle the main part of the song, you're going to do the ornamentation. And so much of what you see at dueling piano bars musically, so technically, is not very polished. I mean, you're not seeing the level of musicianship that you would see at Verizon Hall and the Kimmel Center here in Philadelphia. That's not to say that the piano players can't do it, but because you've got two people now, it gives me the freedom to focus more on the song and the crowd. So playing what block chords would be called, and you'll do more of the runs and the ornamentation. So if you think about top line versus bottom line, treble versus bass, generally the person who's singing is focused on keeping the rhythm of the song and
The anchor, the bass, the stability, and then the fun craziness on top.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. I think it's also just like, I mean, obviously you've brought metaphors and analogies from this into what you do now and into the business world and into the keynote speaking aspects, but I still find that just in its own right, just completely independent from what you do now, which we'll get into, like that's a really good metaphor for life, right? There, you want some aspects of stability, you want some aspects of baseline, you want some aspects of familiarity, but then you also want to have this creative freedom and expression and ability to make mistakes, but also to innovate and create at the same time.
Absolutely. And that makes it very gratifying as a performer to be able to go in and you have this anchor of, well, everything I'm going to play is generally a pop song. So in theory, it works for a crowd. I mean, it's commercially viable
Right.
out there. So
You're not paying Beethoven for a bar.
yeah, you're not playing your own stuff. So you're not like, gosh, I really hope they like it. So you've got that stability that, okay, I know that the music is generally going to be well received by the crowd. The challenge or the opportunity is, how do I keep it interesting both for me and for them? So, Britney Spears is kind of a great example. Like, it's a fun song for the crowd. They're not very fun to play,
Right,
'cause
right, right.
they're pretty basic generally, especially trying to get all of that musicality on just a piano. So how do we bring it to life? Is it like a silly voice that we're going to give to singing the song? Is it some back and forth that we've rehearsed where we have like a funny bit? Do we purposefully replace some of the lyrics? Like there's, for example, something I do is a mashup with several different songs over a pretty consistent chord progression. And two songs that work really well for that are Shaggy's It Wasn't Me and
Hmm.
Angel. And so I concocted this story that It Wasn't Me was about Shaggy cheating. And I think that's probably true. But then I go, well, but thankfully he wrote an apology song, as all good people do. He apologized. And then I start playing Angel, which gets a bit of a laugh. And one of the lyrics is, girl, you're my angel, you're my darling angel, closer than my peeps you are to me. But in the empty space there, I go, but not closer than the neighbor, because that's who he was cheating with, right? So you can have those fun little moments in a song that's not very musically interesting, but it makes the storyline interesting for the audience. And so they're like, oh, yeah.
It's like a whole tapestry of there's the music, there's the kind of improv on top of the music, there's the improv with just humor layered in, there's whether it's playing with lyrics or just spoken word on top of it. I mean, it's really quite a tapestry that you like weave together with different pieces, and then the end product is this creative expression that you're co-creating with someone else. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot
So
of, I was
yeah.
going to say there's a lot of variety in terms of who you'll find at a dueling piano bar performing. Some are very technically gifted performers. There are some guys that I play with um, who during the pandemic, I created a virtual piano bar. And so because the real piano bars, the in-person ones were closed, I had the opportunity to invite a lot of my friends who are performers to come and play and make some money in the virtual piano bar. And it was so much fun to just be able to sit back and watch some of them perform. I mean, normally they're on the other side of the piano. I can't really see what they're doing. And
Right.
One of them in particular, a guy named John Gresha, he is one of the most talented pianists that I know. And so getting to just watch him do what he does with a piano, I mean, God, he makes it sound like there are 5 people playing this instrument. It's unbelievable. So there are some technically gifted performers. There are some who are, good enough on the piano. They're not bad, but they're much better singers. And I, prior to all my vocal cord surgeries, I think I fell into that category. I can hold my own playing piano, but my real talent was singing. I was one of the better singers at most of the bars that I would play at. Then there are folks who are, again, passable piano players, uh, passable singers, but damn, they're funny. They just find these opportunities to bring wit and hilarity into songs that blows the audience away and creates a real experience. So it is that hodgepodge and that sort of team that you create that can make the difference between a great night at a piano bar and a ho-hum experience.
And you probably never really know what you're going to get because who are you going to be, performing with, and then how are they feeling that day, and what are their strengths, and maybe you have an idea, but there's also this element of it's live, it's improv ish, and so or maybe it's full improv. I don't know how you classify it, but yeah, there's this kind of element of who knows what we're going to get tonight.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, especially now that I don't actively play at dueling piano bars or piano bars anymore, the keynotes and the work that I do today takes up the brunt of my time outside of parenting. And when I'm traveling, I love to go to a piano bar right at the beginning of the night because you start to see the first 30, 40 minutes at a piano, first 30 minutes at a piano bar, especially a dueling piano bar, is just that. You're pretty familiar with who you're going to play with that night, unless somebody calls out. You generally know who's going to be on the rotation, but you're like, who had a rough day, who's feeling a little vocally fatigued. And so you're feeling each other out. And to me, as an observer who understands what's going on behind the scenes, I'm fascinated by that, how quickly they pick up on what's happening, how they're reading the room. And then you get 2 hours in and everybody's warmed up, they're cranking, and you really see the experience come alive.
I can see a lot of the corollaries between what you do and what you speak about now and reading the room, having EQ, understanding the partner that you're working with. How do you do the dance? How do you communicate most effectively or entertain most effectively the audience that you have? So just everyone's probably wondering why is Elijah talking to this pianist when normally he talks about business or entrepreneurship. So fill us in, right? So what are you focused on now with your keynotes, but also just your kind of philosophy, the book you've written? Fill us in on Greg.
Yeah. So the transition from entertainer to keynote speaker, author, researcher happened around 2018, 2019. You have to go back a bit further, though, to understand why it happened. And in 2015, while I was performing actively, I had a vocal cord injury that had been brewing for a little while that forced me to go into the ENT's office, the ear, nose, and throat doctor's office, because my voice stopped working. And they discovered that one of my vocal cords had become paralyzed due to misuse and abuse over the years of trying to be Britney Spears and then trying to sing Journey and then doing all these different machinations to get the sounds that I wanted. And I was in a bad spot. They said, if you don't go in for surgery immediately, your other vocal cord is at risk of becoming paralyzed because it's trying to carry all of the work.
Question. Do we only have 2?
Yes.
I had no idea.
Two
Okay.
vocal cords. If we're being honest, is a bit, graphic, but it kind of looks like a throat vagina is sort of what your vocal cords look like. And they're these very small.
We'll forget that visual.
But you'll never forget it. But powerful kind of muscles that are very pliable, and they sort of wave together like this. And so if you think about how a reed instrument makes noise, you blow air across the reed and the vibration creates sound. The vibration is sound, but that's what creates the sound. And so when one vocal cord is paralyzed, it's basically just flat and not mobile at all. It's not pliable. It's not doing anything. It's just there. And so the worry was that the other one was trying to compensate, and it was working so hard that it would ultimately also become paralyzed. And if that happened, the doctors told me, you can't revitalize it. you kind of have to coax the one back into function. But if they're both there, there's nothing to both paralyzed, there's nothing to coax. And so his contention, the doctor's position was, you've got about 2 weeks to maybe 2 months before that happens. So we need to act
Wow.
now. And his position was also that how the damage was so bad, my singing career was over. And so the mission was save my voice so that I could continue my day job. Because I wasn't Beyonce, I wasn't making Beyonce money. I had to have a day job too. And so my day job involved a lot of speaking. This contributed to the degradation of my vocal cords. You speak all day, you sing all night, your vocal cords need rest, they need health. And so I was now put in this place where not only did I have to have surgery, which took me completely out of the piano bar and severely impacted my day job, I didn't know how long recovery was going to take. And so the first surgery from surgery,
And were you like shitting bricks? You're like, oh, my
100%.
entire livelihood is using my voice, and now I can potentially lose it forever. And even if I don't, I have to go through multiple surgeries. And like, this is a bad. Like, what was your mental at that point?
Not good, not good
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
And so one surgery led to another, then another, as we're trying to rebuild and restore vocal function. And probably around the fourth surgery, my mental health was in such a poor state that I was suicidal. I mean, I was very deeply depressed. I recall vividly waiting for the subway to get to work in Center City here in Philly and having this very strong thought that maybe the answer was just stepping in front of the train instead of getting on it. And that was the spark to do something to restore my mental health, to sort of get in a better place. And ultimately, that quest to become less depressed, to get back to a state of normal, led me to a self-help event where I met a woman named Svetlana. And she wasn't a speaker at the event, she was just an attendee. But the conversation we had opened my eyes to this potential that maybe my background and all of the things that I'd done, been interested in life, if instead of separating those interests, like I had my sales skills that I used during my day job, I had the piano bar and entertainment skills I used at night, I had this deep interest in psychology and philosophy, which I had also studied at university, and all these other things, what if instead of keeping them separate, they were all bundled into one? And that led to the world of keynote speaking. And so when I started speaking, the piano was really a differentiator for me, and it still is. And being able to merge what I did in the world of piano bars and how we thought about reading the room and dealing with uncertainty and creating the type of experience people want to have again and again and again, it just it meshed so well with what the business community was craving and struggling with, which is how do we keep people excited about the work that they do? How do we, in some cases, get them excited or reinvigorate their passion about the work that we do? How do we equip our people with the skills they need to navigate uncertainty reliably and deliver a performance, even when you may not have all the assets or the tools that you need, deliver a performance that the audience enjoys and wants more of? And that led me here. A bunch of research over the last several years contributed to the work that is in my book, The Tip Jar Culture. And it's what people learn about and experience when I'm on stage delivering keynotes.
That's awesome. So I appreciate you sharing all that. Two things. One, just a comment on the fact that you really incorporated all aspects of who you are into building this career. I think that's something that's underappreciated, because one narrative that I think is too loud in society is that you need to be a specialist. You need to go very deep as a software engineer or a designer or a pianist, or whatever it is, right? And that's the correct path. And I think that while we do need specialists, and specialists have a very important function, I don't think it's the only path. And I think there's so much unique value in you. You will probably never be the best pianist in the world, but if you blend being a piano player and a keynote speaker and your psychology background, you could be the best one of one. You could be the best Greg in the world, and Greg is multiple different things. And so I think that there's so much value when we really embrace the different aspects of who we are, because then we're not competing against all the other piano players or all the other keynote speakers or all the other, psychology majors. It's this unique category where you are the only one, and so you have unique value that you can give, and maybe you're not going to become the, billionaire Elon Musk or whatever it is, but you can still create so much value and it's fully aligned with who you are, which at the end of the day, I think is far more rewarding than being a specialist in something that isn't fully exposing or expressing all aspects of who you are.
Yeah. I mean, what's coming up for me as you're speaking is that I spent so much of my life trying to fit in. And in some cases, the skill that I developed in terms of being a chameleon, reading the room and then shifting how I show up to sort of fit that mold, it was helpful. It's a valuable skill, but it was only when I accepted the opportunity to stand out that I really started to shine and feel like I enjoyed what I was doing. And a great example of that is recently I just released a new speaking demo. And so in the world of keynote
What's a
speakers,
demo?
yeah, in the world of keynote speakers, sort of what we lead with when someone is interested in learning about what we do is a short 3-minute, some are 5-minute, but a video that sort of explains the problem that we see, the credibility that we have. So why even listen to me about this problem? And then the solution or transformation that we offer. And as a chameleon, so part of the skill that I learned is there are a lot of other people who have been successful at things we'd like to do. And instead of reinventing a wheel, study that success and then sort of steal shamelessly or replicate it in a way that feels unique to me. I did that in my sales career. I would do ride days or ride alongs with other sales reps. And when I would see them do something in a sales call that worked well, I'd go, oh, I'm going to add that to my bag of tricks. And then I'd do it in a way that was mine, but it was inspired by them. And I was having a problem with this speaker reel, making something that felt like me and different, a product of one, a Greg, if you will, because I was looking at all of these other speakers who were successful. In many cases, I was looking at the people who were miles ahead of where I am now and going, all right, if they're doing this, how do I sort of replicate that but make it feel like me? And it just wasn't working. And it wasn't until I stopped watching other speakers' reels for inspiration and started looking to a different domain. And ultimately, I looked at Netflix specials and Apple TV specials for musicians and comedians, and how did Amazon and Apple and Netflix advertise those? Because that's really what a demo reel is for a speaker. It's an advertisement. And so I said, we're going to scrap this whole thing we just spent months working on, the storyboard. It's gone. We're going to build this now. And I came up with a reel that is vastly different from what many speakers put out, but is so perfect for me and what I'm offering. And there is this tendency in both music and business to just try to recreate what other people have done and put your own spin on it. And sometimes the more appropriate path is to burn that down and say, nope, I'm going to do the thing that's uniquely me. And so having permission, in my case, I actually needed to get it from other people. I had a coach who would say to me, I need you to kill Gregory Offner and let Geo come out. That was what she called me, Geo, Greg Offner. She's like, I need Geo to show up. What would he do? And Gregory Offner's got this corporate stuff embedded in him, all this corporate baggage. Like, what would Geo do? And so by having that permission slip, I said, okay, yeah, what if it was totally different? And so many companies, I was just watching a video earlier about On, the shoes. I think that's what the company's called, the Cloud. Like you see a lot of people wearing them in the airport now. So you got like Hoka's and you got like Ons, that ON thing, right? They took a regular shoe and effectively put rubber hoses underneath the bottom of the tread. And they just went in their completely own direction with how they were going to build this shoe, and they've become a phenomenally successful brand. So sometimes it really is just burning down what is the standard and building up what is your new standard that leads to success.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, just talking about waiting for that train and feeling that pull and being in that mental state. I think a lot of us experience depression or periods of difficulty in life, and it, can be in varying degrees. But what exactly, how did you channel that into deciding to make changes and to kind of explore this other direction? Because I think some people struggle with staying in that area, but can't find the motivation, the action, the whatever it is to lean in one direction versus the other. And I think it's it's a piece of your story, and you made this transformation, and it's a beautiful transformation. But also in that moment, I'm sure it felt impossible to do. So how did you actually transform that moment into where you are now, and maybe advice to others who might be looking to do the same?
Um, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So I think first getting getting help is critical, and that doesn't necessarily mean just like going to a psychologist. It's just which is valuable. Talking to someone is valuable, but only if you're going to be completely honest. There is very little value in trying to bullshit a bullshitter, and psychologists are trained to pick apart bullshit. So I have learned through, my background in psych. I just went in on day one and was like, here's my problems. Like, here it is as I see it.
Just vomit it out.
Yeah.
Just full
Very,
transparency.
very, very helpful. And I've had this belief in the power of strangers. And so whether it is a psychologist or whether it's just anyone, it's like somebody you're sitting next to at an airport bar. A lot of times when you're having a challenge or you're running into a roadblock, sharing that candidly with a stranger can give you unique perspective. And so I acknowledged that I needed help, that I wanted help. Not so much that I needed, but that I wanted is critical. You have to want it. Even if you need it, if you don't want it, nobody can help you. So I acknowledged that I wanted help to get out of this situation. And as I was looking for the right therapist for me, I stumbled upon the documentary one weekend for Tony Robbins's I Am Not Your Guru. It was may still be on Netflix. I had never been a Tony Robbins fan. And in fact, a friend tried to get me to read his sort of like signature, his first book, Awaken the Giant Within.
The Giant Within?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a vivid memory of reading the first 3 pages or so, maybe it's the preface, and there's a line where it's like, as I was flying in my helicopter, I looked down and saw the school where I used to be a janitor and thought, wow, things change. I literally threw the book and I was like, no way, man. Sorry. And that was years before watching this documentary. And as I watched the documentary, which takes you through how he prepares for and thinks about his events, but then also into the events themselves, I saw him using therapeutic interventions that I had studied in school. So now I'm going, maybe this isn't all smoke and mirrors. Maybe there's really something to this. And I just went online and was like, when is the next seminar? And there happened to be one coming up in New Jersey. So I booked a ticket. This was not the end of my journey for help, but it was just take a step, take action. Motion creates change. Any motion when you're feeling stuck creates change. Going for a walk, going to the gym. So I showed up to this seminar and was in full on like audit mode, right? Like, I'm not going to participate. I'm not here for a grade. I'm just here to observe. I don't want to high five and hug anybody. Like, don't try to get me into the woo woo.
This is still bullshit, but I'm gonna watch and just see maybe there's something I can take away. Yeah.
And
the skeptic.
The first moment of change for me, Elijah, was a meditation. He didn't couch it as a meditation, but that he did the first day, that we did the first day. And you're among probably like 15, 20,000 other people. So you're sitting in this big arena.
Crazy.
And I started to cry and my body felt lighter. I had never felt like this before. I'm diagnosed ADD, was on Ritalin most of my early childhood. I had never felt this calmness or lightness in my body. And that was the first physiological signal that something's changing. And so then I shifted from audit to like active participant in this experience.
And quick double click on that. Do you think it was the meditation, or do you think it was the power of being with 20,000 other people doing something, or something else? Like, have you thought about what the specifics in the ingredients were for that that snapping out of the skeptic auditor?
I mean, I think it's a combination of those. The the events themselves are highly produced. They are highly engineered. Every moment, every interaction, bar the stuff that's happening, in the hallways or concourses in between, bits that he's doing, everything is highly scripted. The music, the lighting, the temperature, he's very anal about the production, and for a reason. He wants it to work for people. And it doesn't work for everyone. I mean, I don't think he would disagree with that if I got the chance to talk to him. But it works when you're willing and open for it to work. And so I was desperate for something to work. But I think it was that stillness as well. Just me being still, shutting off this meditation, shut off my brain even for just a moment, and it allowed my body to feel lighter. I haven't thought a lot about it this deeply, as to why it worked, but in that moment I went from observer to participant. And one of the points that he hit on in that first day was, in order for change to happen, you have to change something about yourself, like who you are. So who would I need to become for things to become different? And that's going to be important later. So now day 2, we're on a break, and I'm in the concourse waiting in line for soup, because I was on the keto diet, and the only thing that they were serving at this freaking concession stand that I could eat was soup. So I'm in the soup line, and in front of me is this large woman. And I don't mean like weight large. I just mean large, tall, there. She's just a big human being. She was wearing this huge coat because it's freaking freezing. He keeps it like probably 50 degrees in these sessions.
Interesting.
So she turns around and says, "Hey, how many of these?" Introduces herself and says, "How many of these have you been to?" And I didn't really want to speak very much because it was loud, and I'm still guarding my voice because I'm in the middle of recovery from one of the surgeries. And I said, "This is my first one. What about you?" She said, "This is my 13th." I said, 13? What keeps you coming back? Like, what is it that you love about this? And that started a conversation, and she wound up telling me her life story, how she got to be there. And it was dramatic and filled with resilience and grit and determination and change. And we talked for probably 20 minutes while we were eating, and then started to walk around the concourse. And she said, "Well, what about you? What's your story?" And Elijah, after hearing hers, I was like, "I'm not going to try to top that. You don't even want to hear my story." And she goes, "No, tell me, like, why are you here? What is it that you want out of this?" And we go back to that belief in the power of strangers. I thought, I'm just going to unload on this stranger and see what she has to say. And so I told her everything, that I was feeling depressed and suicidal. I felt like I was failing in life because I'd lost the one thing that allowed me to be successful in both my day job and my night job, my voice. And I didn't know who I was going to be without this part of me. This is me. My voice is me, and it's gone. And as we're talking and she's listening, and we're now at this point in the arena where you can see the seats. Like, so I don't know what the tunnel, if you will, when you're out in the concourse and you want to go back to the seating area, there's that tunnel. So you can sort of see into the arena, but you're not in the arena.
Oh, like when you're walking around a stadium and then you're going back into the seating
Exactly.
section. Yeah.
So we're standing there, and she goes, "You don't see it, do you?" I said, "See what?" She says, "You've been trying to keep these parts of you in separate buckets." And I sort of alluded to that earlier in our conversation, Elijah. And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, what if you put all that into one thing?" And I said, "That sounds amazing. I have no idea what that would look like." And she's smiling, and I can see the sparkle in her eyes. And I go, "But I feel like you have some sort of idea because of what I see in your face right now." And she goes, "I think if you did that," and she put her arm around my shoulder and sort of pointed me towards the arena, and we're looking through that little tunnel, and she goes, "I think you could be there." And she's pointing up at the stage, and I get chills every time I tell this story.
I literally have, I don't know if you can see, I literally have chills and my hair standing on it. I don't know why, but I love transformation stories. This is great. Keep going.
It just hit me like a ton of bricks that I would fucking love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Nothing had ever felt so real to me in terms of what I might be able to do or to contribute as that idea. And so we kept talking, but I'm not even really listening, I'm embarrassed to say. In the back of my head, I'm just thinking about this idea and going, yeah, yeah, yeah. So when the day ended, I was staying at a hotel in New Jersey, I went back to my room and I started to just scribble in this journal that they'd given us. Who would I need to become for this to be possible? Like, what about me and how
Hmm.
I approach the world? What would I need to learn? What would I need to do differently? And the event itself was great and transformational. I really enjoyed the experience of both being there and participating in all the different sessions. But when I went home, I shared, first of all, I started meditating regularly, and I've fallen off of that a bit with 2 kids and just life. But I started to reach out to other speakers and coaches and consultants and ask if I could have 5-10 minutes of their time, grab a coffee, just chat through email. And most people were open to a call or to meet in person if they were in the area. And I met with somewhere around 40 or 50 different people over the course of
Wow.
the next
Wow.
several weeks. And to a person, one of the questions I asked was, what's the hardest part about this business, or what do you wish you knew before you started? To a person, they all said sales. Like, getting clients is the hardest part of this job. And I thought, I've been doing sales for companies for 15 years in varying states of give a shit about what I'm doing. Like, the money's great, but do I really care?
Hmm.
The money's
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
I'm good at sales. I could be great at selling myself because I do care about me and I do believe in what I'm trying to do with as a speaker. So that for me was the moment where I was confident I could make this work. So confident that I said to my wife, I'm going to start this and I'm going to burn through all of the savings that I have if that's what it takes. And if I'm not successful, I'll go get a job at Wendy's. Like, I don't care where. Like, I'll provide, I'll find something of meaning to do in the world, but I'm going to give this everything I have. And so I started to incorporate and build a website and sort of do all these things in the background in my off hours, because I still had a day job. And I reached a point where I had the website, I had the company, and my boss found the website. And I walked in one day to a printout of the homepage of my website, and on top of
Oh,
it was a
fuck.
little post-it note that said, "Come see me, we should talk." And we sat down in a conference room, and the truth is I had not been performing well as a salesperson for this company. It was difficult to speak. It was difficult to conduct sales meetings. I was emotionally checked out of the job for sure.
Hmm.
He said, look, I feel like this is what you should go and do. And because we are an HR consulting company, and one of the things on the masthead of your website is employee engagement consulting, I kind of feel like there's a big conflict of interest. So I want to give you the space and the time to go do this. So we're going to separate your employment today. I'm going to give you as much severance as I can. I want you to be successful, but you're not going to be working here anymore. It was the kindest termination that I think I've ever been through. And it was June of 2019, about 6 months before where I was intending to start the business full on. My thought was I'm going to save up some more money, build the nest egg as big as I can to give myself as much.
But 2020 was going to be your big year to go
2020
start
was my
talking.
breakout year. I had just attended a session months before by Dan Pink, and he had a book that talked about temporal landmarks. And he said, dates that end in a 0 or a 5 are stronger for us than others. And start something at the beginning of a month or the beginning of a year is a stronger anchor point. So I was like, 2020, it doesn't get more anchor than that. January 1st doesn't get more anchor than that. Let's go, baby. But here I am now, June of 2019. And so I hired a coach, someone who knew the speaking industry, to help me understand, how do I sell and market in this industry? What do I need to know? How do I approach this methodically? I'm bringing the methods and the strategies that worked in corporate sales into this industry. So I knew that I had the disciplines and the framework for selling, but I didn't know how to apply that to this industry. So in the first 6 months, like leading up to January 1st, I booked what is for a speaker a substantial amount of business. I booked just under $70,000 worth of speaking engagements, going from
Impressive.
nothing to that. So to my wife and I, we're going like, this is working. Like this has potential. And then we all know what happened in early 2020. The world shut down. And so what turned out to be a great thing for me in hindsight was the most catastrophic thing that could have happened. Speaking events are all canceled. Everything's going online. How do we make this work? Enter the virtual piano bar. Everybody could get on Zoom and deliver a speech if they wanted to, put a PowerPoint together, just get a nice microphone and speak. But not everybody had a piano and the ability to use the chat in Zoom as a request slip and entertain people when they're dying for entertainment, something that's relevant and personal to them, not just a video they can watch that's funny, but an experience they can participate in. And it also happened to equalize all speakers in all industries because nobody was great at virtual. Everybody was figuring this out. So now,
Did it take you a while to kind of have this revelation, though? I mean, this is taking what could be a death knell to your budding career and passion and dream, and now you're saying, "Oh, well, it's the great equalizer, and everyone's on the same playing field, and I had differentiated skills." But was there a moment of like, "Shit, like this is gonna suck and fail," or were you just like, "I will find a way. I don't know what this COVID thing is, but I'll find a way."
yeah, it was find a way. I had the opportunity to do 2 speaking engagements before the pandemic actually shut everything down. In fact, my last engagement was March 13th at a banking conference, and I stepped on stage. There were about 300 some people in the room, and when I stepped off stage, there were maybe 80. And I said to the organizer, I
Wow.
was like, "Did that?" I felt like that was
Am I
going
that
well.
bad?
Like, did that go poorly? She said, "No, everybody's getting called back. We're shutting down offices. Like, you should probably get home because this seems like it's a really big deal." And so I had the bug, right? I got to understand what it's like to be
Yeah,
on stage
yeah.
in front of an audience, and I said to Kim, "This is I'm going to make this happen. This is only going to be 2 weeks, right? Just 2 weeks, so we're good." Um,
We'll wait it out.
yeah, so there, there was a lot of sourdough bread and Miller Lite in those couple weeks. Um, but ultimately, what now in hindsight was like a great opportunity because of the equalization that happened was just this: I'm going to figure it out. Pivoting is what we have to do. It's what I did when I lost my voice in the first place. It's what we're going to do now. Um, so the virtual piano bar became this backstop, I guess, right? I wasn't booking virtual speaking gigs that were paying, but I was booking these piano bar engagements that were paying. And that created relationships and that created opportunity to bring some of my friends in and help them make some money during the pandemic. So I was feeling an immense sense of fulfillment through that. And it still felt like a bit of a waiting game. But then I started to network and make connections with other people who were speakers that were miles ahead of me outside of the pandemic. But now we're on that same playing field and they're going, "Hey, you're doing this
Mhm.
musical thing. I do a musical thing. How do you get the music to work over Zoom without it, trying to think it's background noise?" And now I'm problem solving with these very seasoned and experienced and successful speakers. And they're seeing how tenacious and committed I was to this profession. And so they wanted to help me. And that I can't quantify how important that was for this journey to get me where any success that I have now is because of them and because of the people that helped me. So
And I think just to interject here, I think that's fairly common in my experience, or what I've observed is when you believe in something, yourself, your business, whatever you believe in, it doesn't matter where everyone else is when you start, because no one else is going to believe in it. You have to birth it, you have to create it, you have to be the energy behind it. But if you consistently show up and you consistently put effort into it and you consistently believe in it, at some point someone will notice. People will start noticing, and then maybe they're like, "Oh, that's the weirdo Greg, the one of one, and he's doing like a bunch of different things, and it doesn't make sense." But as you keep beating on that craft and you keep pushing it forward, eventually people are like, "Oh, I get this. I want to be a part of this. I want to help out." And you kind of get over that initial inertia of this isn't going to happen unless I make it happen. And then at some point, people want to start helping, and then it just becomes this easier and easier and easier thing that happens. But getting to that point is the difficult part.
Yeah. And I was initially put off, but in hindsight, I understand, by my network's lack of willingness to help me, my existing network. This new
Hmm.
network
Hmm.
I was making were very interested in helping because they saw my commitment and my passion. But my existing network was very skeptical.
You don't fit in a box that they understand.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
And that, to go back to the Tony Robbins event, that was a part of the conversation in that session was like, hey, when you start to make these changes, understand it's going to scare people in your network because now their position relative to your changing position, now they feel like something's amiss with their world. It's really nothing to do with you. It's all to do with them because positioning is relative. And so my position, I saw my life improving and changing. And they were like, well, what does that mean for my life? And so instead of helping, they were
right.
actually sort of pushing me away,
There's fear.
consciously or
There's fear.
unconsciously. Yeah. So it sort of lost the plot as to where we're going with this, Elijah, but that experience,
Well, that's the beauty of storytelling, right? You just go.
that experience,
But
COVID turned out to be a blessing for me.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the other thing too, we've heard it so many times. It's maybe trite and overused, but the resourcefulness, not the resources. And so, despite what happened at different stages, you still kept pushing forward with this identity that you chose to lean into and to become. And so now, I mean, now all of your income, or well, you tell me, like, where is your income all coming from speaking? Like, what does it look like today in terms of what you do, having gotten through the initial starting, getting the belief, getting the support, and then really leaning into the keynote speaking?
Yeah, it is. It is the lion's share of my income. It is, I mean, it is the thing that I do. So I don't have a W
Yeah,
2 job with some other company or, this is, I speak for a living. I write books for a living. Um, it is more successful than I imagined at the onset. I remember sharing a number with Kim and I said, if I can just make this, but be my
hmm,
own
hmm,
boss, I'll be happy. And
hmm.
I've surpassed that multiple times over, which blows me away. And I think more is how many people I'm able to impact. Like it still feels weird isn't the word, special is probably the word. When I go to an event and folks want to talk to me afterwards, and some of them have already read my book before the keynote now,
That's
and they're
wild.
saying, I'm so excited to meet you. I really enjoyed this part of it. It, I never had that in life. I never thought I'd have that in life. I mean, little Gregory playing drums in his parents' basement at 10 had these dreams of touring the world and being a rock star. And, during the pandemic, the back bedroom of my house turned into like a literal TV studio. And I remember walking in one day and just going, if little Gregory could see this, he would just think you're the coolest guy in the world.
That's awesome.
And
That's
like the
awesome.
fact that that's, yeah, this is gonna sound so corny. Some days I feel like I'm living a dream. It's really cool.
That's beautiful. In terms of your speaking and how you help people, I think one of the cool things is that, again, it's not just the narrative and the story and the journey that you've gone through to tie it all together, but you actually pull out elements from your dueling piano days, from the lurkers versus the what is it, the jump uppers,
The
um
keepers, leapers, and sleepers. Yeah, exactly.
keepers, leapers, and sleepers. Yeah. So talk about that. And then even, I mean, if you think about keynote, if you just like literally look at the word, it's almost like it's fate kind of pulling these things together. There is a keynote. You speak the keynote, you play the keynote. So there's a lot of puns that you can play with, but also there's a lot of strength in terms of how you speak to your process and what you've observed with different aspects from dueling pianos and from bars and from your entire journey that just maybe doesn't make sense when it was happening, but now it all fits in perfectly. So share a bit about how you help companies and sleepers, keepers,
Yeah.
and leapers.
I mean, most of to this point in our conversation, Elijah, everything we've talked about, none of that is shared on stage. It's the experience on stage is
Yeah.
not about me, it's about the audience. But what is helpful to them is to show them my world because they're interested in it. The piano bar or the world of dueling pianos is kind of a black box to audience members. They're aware of what a piano bar is, and they've probably been to a piano bar or a dueling piano bar, but they don't get how the sausage is made, and they don't understand why things happen and what we're doing. And really, in many cases, don't even realize that there's so much thought and strategy and intention behind the design of the experience for the audience. And so I'm able to share what I did there and then as a metaphor for what, and use it as a metaphor for what they're doing in work. And they make the connection automatically when they start to understand, oh, keepers, leapers, and sleepers are like these three groups of people in the audience. So keepers are the regulars, the folks who would Google, if you're going to Texas, where's the best piano bar in Dallas? And they want to show up there, right? They love the experience. They love
It's their scene.
people that they meet. Yeah. There's folks like that in every business. You go to the Apple store and there are folks who are like, I work at the Genius Bar and I don't want to work anywhere else. These are my people. I love solving problems and helping you understand the complex world of computers that I see is really simple. Like, it's my jam. I love it. So we got keepers everywhere, not just in the piano bar. And there's leapers everywhere too. Leapers are the type of folks who would come in maybe with a big group. They're a birthday or a bachelorette party or something. And they're going to come in and they're going to raise hell and have a great time for an hour, 2 hours, but they're probably not spending the whole night at our piano bar. They may have come from a bar and we're the second stop, or we may be the first stop or the second stop, and they've got a third stop somewhere. So they're not here for a long time, but they're here for a good time. And they're highly engaged. They're making the experience better for everybody else. But this isn't where they're going to be all night. And there's definitely a corollary in the work world that there are people working in companies who are really good at what they do, who perform and engage at a high level, but they're not here to stay. The reason they're performing and engaging at a high level is because they want the career capital to move somewhere else, to get the next role, to move to the next company. How do we treat them? How do we ensure that we're giving them what they came for rather than trying to just get out of them everything we want? And then the sleepers are the folks who maybe are part of that birthday party or bachelorette party that they really aren't the piano bar types, but they're there. They're there. And just like at work, there are folks who work for organizations that maybe I really don't care so much about this company's mission, but I needed a job and they needed a warm body. And here we are. And what I've learned is that it's up to us, the leaders at the piano bar and the leaders in organizations, to reach out and connect with those sleepers and ask, why are you here? It's not by accident. You didn't wind up at the piano bar by accident. I mean, unless, maybe you're in New Orleans and you just sort of like come to and you're like, oh, here I am. But especially in the workplace, you have to go through interviews. So you are by definition engaged when you start the job.
With some amount of intentional choice and active effort to go there in the first place.
Yeah. And somewhere along the way, if you've become a sleeper, you've made the decision to disengage from the experience, to say, this is not delivering what I thought it was going to deliver. And so my job as a leader in the piano bar and their job as a leader in the organization is to have a conversation with that sleeper. And it's really simple. Understand, why are you here? What is it that you'd like to get out of this experience? And what happens is the sleepers either go, you know what, this isn't the place I want to be. That's the place I want to be. And they make the leap, or they realize what's possible, what they could get from this experience, and they become a keeper. So I've started saying that a sleeper is just a leaper or a keeper who hasn't figured it out yet, who hasn't been asked the right question. And when I share,
that ties into, just to tie it back to what you were saying before, is about motion, right? So getting them out of just sleeping and into some amount of motion, whether it's to leave or to join and participate, but either way, galvanizing some amount of action, some amount of motion to result in something better than what is currently.
And if we go back just to tie this together to that conversation about looking for help when I was feeling very depressed, and what I said about going to see a therapist or talking to a stranger, it's, like, don't bullshit a bullshitter. I think there's so much bullshit at work, even in the initial interview process. If we're honest in the conversation, we can get what we want. But if we're trying to camouflage our true intentions, because God, I got fired from the last job and I don't want these people to think I'm a loser, so I'm going to say what I think needs to be said to get the job here and then figure it out, like, you're going to automatically put yourself in a position to lose by being dishonest. And so in that conversation with a sleeper or with an audience member, you have to build trust. You have to build the opportunity for honesty to exist. Now, at the piano bar, it's really easy. It's low stakes. Hey, why are you here? What can I do to make your day an 11 out of 10 right now? There's another bar down the street. If you're not into this thing, let me tell you, there is another place that's awesome that I'd recommend. And I'm not telling you got to leave, but I want you to have a great night. If it's not going to be here, I'd love it to be somewhere else. That conversation has a lot in common with how we need to approach someone who's not performing in our organization. It's like, hey, you're not a bad person if this ain't the right fit. And in fact, I'm going to take ownership since I brought you into this company, or since I'm your manager now at this company. If this isn't the place for you, there are certain things I need you to do every day that are minimum requirements of this job. But let's have a one-on-one every week and let's plot out how to get you where you'd like to be. And
Whether here or elsewhere.
exactly. And even that conversation starts to build trust and break down that barrier of dishonesty where a person goes, you know what? This may not be the place for me, but damn it, they care. And the beauty and the benefit to the organization and to the leader who's courageous enough to have that conversation is that when that leaper goes to their next destination, they're going to go to lunch with their new coworkers, or they're going to have conversations offline if it's a remote job. And at some point, the coworkers are going to ask about their old company and their old boss and what was it like. Because their coworkers might be looking to make a leap. These new coworkers of yours may be ready to make their own leap. And how you describe your past employer and that past relationship with a manager, that can become $1 million recruitment opportunity. Because that conversation is the difference between whether the phone rings and the manager picks up and it's a voice on the other end saying, hey, I heard you're an amazing manager to work for. Can we grab a coffee? Can I learn a bit more about your company? Or not? And in a world where great talent is hard to come by and sometimes even harder to keep, those are the type of experiences that people want again and again and again. And so I share, again, the piano bar framework of how we create that environment, and then some strategies that the everyday employee, manager, leader, corporate type can bring into their organization to create similar experiences.
Makes so much sense. I think even in non-professional settings, we have this kind of societal veneer of politeness. And so, I personally don't necessarily use the word dishonest because while it is dishonest, it's almost more just disingenuous or inauthentic. And so you can pretend to be something else. And you're right, it is dishonest. It's not fully truthful if you are being polite when you actually don't want to be, or you're saying nice things to someone that you don't really believe. And so when you just rip that out, first of all, it's a little bit shocking. People are like, oh, wait, I can just talk with you and it's like a real conversation. But then after you get over that initial shock, it's so refreshing because we live in this world, social media, the internet, media, and then also even in our own interpersonal relationships, it's kind of this like we're all playing into the same delusion of like, oh, I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm great. Oh, that's great. Do you like your job? Yeah, job's great. And then it's like, well, if you just rip that down, you say, no, I'm actually not having a good day, or I don't like my job, or I want to do something else, or whatever is even more authentic, more true than this kind of societal veneer. Then you start getting into real conversations. To your point, you can actually connect, and it builds this trust and this rapport and this honesty that allows people to wake up and say, yeah, maybe I don't want to be here, but you're a good manager and you're going to help me figure out either how to make my job more rewarding or promote me into a job that is, or figure out that this is not a good fit. And either way, I need to take some type of action, some type of motion to get to whatever does fulfill me and create meaning for me.
Yeah. Work, I believe that work is about taking action. And I believe that business is the process of solving a problem profitably. And I think that part of that disingenuousness or that sort of inauthentic self that we may bring to work is when a organization or a leader is too focused on the profit and not focused enough on the problem that they're solving. when they're in love with the profit and not in love with the problem anymore. And I think for an individual, the problem arises when they cease to create action in the workplace. And what they're really trying to avoid is action. They're trying to avoid getting fired. They're not in there to solve a problem. They see the problem as I needed health care and I needed a paycheck and I still got it here. So as long as I can keep that up, I'm just going to be.
Problem solved. Try to not ruffle any feathers or have any change.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of a static existence. That makes a lot of sense. So in terms of you having these talks and then these leaders that you're talking to at companies going out and affecting that change, is there I feel like it's so in our nature to get excited about an idea, to feel like it makes sense, and then when we go and execute, we fall short and we kind of, oh, well, it sounded good in the room, but now I don't really know, and should I and shouldn't I? Do you ever come across that or bridge that gap? And if so, how do you help people remain consistent with better communication, better patterns, better leadership, even outside of your stage and your arena?
Yeah, it's something that I'm actively building right now because one of my mentors who I never met, a guy named Zig Ziglar, he was known
Classics.
to say, if you show up to my speech, I can change the way you think. If you read my book, I can change your life. And it's because you only have a certain amount of time on stage. And what I'm trying to do with the keynote is to act as an accelerant for some people who just need to be reminded of these things and sort of refocus them on these ideas, because these aren't new or revolutionary, I don't think, ideas, but they're ideas that we may have forgotten to do. Like I talked earlier about, I've fallen out of practice with the meditation. Man, the benefit is tremendous. And I just need a little kick in the pants sometimes to remind me, make time for it, and you will see the value. And so sometimes that's what the keynote is for folks in the audience. Other times, to them, this is a new idea. It's one they hadn't heard before. And so my goal with the keynote is to bring awareness and to get them to be curious about what it could be if these principles were brought into the workplace. The book serves as a action plan of sorts, and we go deeper into the content, and there's actually research and case studies that support these ideas. But what I'm building now is a literal action plan that people can put into process to create this change. And I've been avoiding it because I've been so delighted by the process of being, or by the ability to be a keynote speaker. But to really create change for these organizations, I also need to have a bit of a consultant's approach to it. And so that is now starting to take shape, and I should have something to be able to share with the world by the end of this year that I'm really excited about. It's going to be an audit that organizations can conduct, an experience audit, to really dig into the elements of the experience. Because like I said earlier, work is about action. So much of the conversation around employee engagement has centered on making the workplace more enjoyable. And I think people are sick of enjoyable workplaces, and what they want is an enjoyable work process. Like make the process of working here easier. Like kegerators are fine. I'm not going to complain. And ping pong tables and comfy couches. Like it gives everybody something to do in terms of solving the problem. But we've been trying to solve this problem of engagement for well over 20 years. In fact, I read a book recently that was written in 1971. And the author talks about how big a problem this idea that they called the transient executive was, and that it's something they've been trying to deal with for years. Well, that just means talent retention in different words. So talent retention has been a problem for over 50 years now, let's say. Okay, couches and ping pong tables and kegerators aren't going to fix it, because the problem isn't the workplace environment, although in some cases you should pay attention to that. The problem is, I want to show up and do the work with as little unnecessary friction as possible. Fix that.
Remove the bullshit, remove the bureaucracy. Let me do what is actually driving value.
Yep. And so that is a big part of the book. And it was the main message I wanted to drive home, in fact, in the book, was that I can get you to think differently about what work could be, that it could be an experience, to think about it like a performance, and to think about your employees like your internal audience. And you spend millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, as an industry, thinking about customer experience. How much are we thinking about the internal customer, the employee? They are consuming the experience of work. And what the numbers tell us is that the experience of work sucks. So we have an opportunity to reframe it. And so what I'm sharing and showing is how we think about the experience at a piano bar and how those very intentional and strategic elements we use to create that experience can be brought into the workplace to create a more compelling, engaging, fulfilling experience for employees. And when we do that, the employees take care of the customers because they like doing the work. We want to solve problems and make a profit as a result, but we want to solve those problems with as little unnecessary friction as possible. And I say unnecessary because some friction is necessary. You need friction to walk. Lifting weights, that stress is what builds bigger muscles. But we want only, or we want to minimize unnecessary friction.
Greg, this has been an awesome conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, where should they go?
Yeah, man. Thanks for asking that. My website is gregoryoffner.com. I'm a Gregory Offner Jr. on all the major socials. So connect with me, drop me an email, a DM, invite me to your organization to speak. I'd love to help more people.
And your book?
It's called The Tip Jar Culture. It's available wherever books are sold.
Cool. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Elijah.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.